So I already finished my top 10 best movies of 2019 video, and you can go check that out right now on my channel. And now we've come to this, the best movies of the decade. There are a lot of fantastic films that came out this decade, and these are the ones I think are definitely worth mentioning. And this video could have easily been like a top 30 or top 50 video, and you guys are probably expecting this to be a top 10 video, but no, I'm giving you guys a top 20 video. And whenever I make one of these videos, I always say this list is subjective. This is just my opinion. These are just my personal picks. If you agree, that's great. If you disagree, that is totally fine. As long as we can get along and respect our opinions, we're good. Since this is a top 20 video, I'm not going to do any honorable mentions because I feel like it will drag the video out even longer. So I want to keep this video as short as possible. And when I talk about each movie, I'm not going to go into depth with each one. I'm just going to do like a brief synopsis and what my thoughts on each one of them are. Alright, enough jibber jabber, let's get into it. These are the best movies of the 2010s. And let's start the list with number 20. The Grand Budapest Hotel. Wes Anderson is one of my favorite directors of all time, and he did release some really good movies this decade, like Moonrise Kingdom and Isle of Dogs, and of course, The Grand Budapest Hotel. And The Grand Budapest Hotel might be my favorite Wes Anderson film of all time. It's just so unique and so colorful, and of all the movies Wes Anderson has released, I feel like The Grand Budapest Hotel is his most beautiful, because the scenery and the cinematography could be hung up in an art museum. The cast was great too. It does have the recurring actors who have been in previous Wes Anderson films like Bill Murray and Edward Norton, but the best actor in the film, in my opinion, was easily Ralph Fiennes. He played the owner of the hotel, and he was phenomenal. He gave the best performance I've seen him in since Schindler's List. So overall, Grand Budapest Hotel was one of the most unique and beautiful movies of the decade. And if you guys have not seen it, I highly recommend checking it out. Wes Anderson is a fantastic filmmaker. Her. Her was definitely one of the most surprising movies I've ever seen. It took a concept that seems bizarre on paper, some guy falling in love with his computer. Like, that sounds stupid, doesn't it? But what I got out of it was a surprisingly powerful and profound film. If you've ever been single or have been single for a majority of your life, this movie will destroy you. It took the message of never take love for granted, and it depicted it in a way that I thought was brilliant and so touching. And it had great performances from Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson. They were phenomenal. Her was definitely a movie that touched me on a personal and emotional level. The last time I watched a romance movie that really touched me on that level was probably Lost in Translation, which ironically also starred Scarlett Johansson. Overall, Her was probably my favorite film to come out of the romance genre this decade, and if you guys have not seen it, I highly recommend checking it out. It may seem like a really weird movie, but trust me, it's a lot more than that. The Lego Movie. When I first heard about the Lego Movie, I reacted like this. Seriously? They're making the Lego Movie? Hollywood is really at this uninspired and unoriginal point now in which they're making the freaking Lego Movie. Oh, that's gonna flop hard. And I saw it, and I take back every word I said. The Lego Movie was one of my favorite animated films to come out this decade, and it's probably the most surprising movie I've ever seen. They took an idea that really should not have worked, and they somehow succeeded on every level. The Lego Movie could have been easily a 2-hour commercial for Legos. Like, this movie had product placement all over it. But instead, what we got out of it was a brilliant, creative, beautiful, and heartfelt movie. The talent behind it was insane too. The cast included Chris Pratt, Will Arnett, Elizabeth Banks, Morgan Freeman, Will Ferrell, Liam Neeson. The cast was great. And just in case if you're wondering, or at least care, yes, I finally got a chance to watch the Lego Movie 2 a few months ago, and I'm just gonna be honest with you guys, I did not like it that much. I didn't hate it. There were some things I liked in it, but overall, I found it to be really forgettable and not that funny and really not that great. It really lacked the magic and the creativity that made the first Lego movie work. Overall, the Lego movie was like lightning in a bottle. They made it work somehow, and they succeeded. Paddington 2. Now, I really liked the first Paddington. I thought it was a great movie. I won't call it perfect, but I really like it overall. However, its sequel, Paddington 2, I think it's one of the best sequels ever made. It was one of the most endearing and delightful films I saw this decade. They took what made the first movie work, and they made it even better in the sequel. The character of Paddington as a whole, he's great. He's always happy, he's always positive, but he's not annoying and he's not an idiot, and more people in our society need to act more like him for sure. My biggest problem I had with the first Paddington was his villain. I didn't really care about the villain that much. She just came off as this wannabe Cruella de Vil for me, but Paddington 2 had a much better villain. Whosever idea it was to cast Hugh Grant as the villain deserves a raise, because he was perfectly casted. What made the villain work in Paddington 2 was his character. He was fun, and even though he was a jerk, he was a fun villain, and you had fun watching him. The Paddington movies, I think, are some of the best family films to come out recently, because more family films need to learn what makes those movies work. They don't have minions, they're not obnoxious, and they're not annoying. The Paddington movies are delightful, they're endearing, and they have good messages for kids to learn. Overall, Paddington 2 was not just a great sequel, it was a fantastic movie, period. Parasite. Parasite was number 5 on my top 10 best movies of the year video, and the more I think about it, it just gets better and better. Parasite was brilliant, and it was genius, and it was surprisingly funny too. Like, I think it's one of the funniest movies to come out this decade. But what really made it work was it was profound and thought-provoking. It had you thinking twice about how the rich views the poor. Overall, if you guys have not seen Parasite yet, I highly recommend seeing it. It is a fantastic movie. Django Unchained. Quentin Tarantino, one of the best filmmakers of all time. And Django Unchained was his best movie in years. Just like with Tarantino's other movies, Django Unchained was crazy, it was fun, and it was brutal. The cast was great too. You got Jamie Foxx, Christoph Waltz, and Leonardo DiCaprio. This was a really different role for him because he doesn't usually play the villain, and he did a great job as the villain. I do like Pulp Fiction and Inglourious Basterds just slightly more, but regardless, Django Unchained is still an awesome movie. Spider-Man Into the SpiderVerse. Into the SpiderVerse was my favorite movie of 2018, and it's one of my favorite animated movies of the decade. In my opinion, Into the Spider-Verse is the best Spider-Man movie because it got the character of Spider-Man right. It didn't disrespect him or treat him like one big joke. It acknowledged why he's one of the most beloved characters in pop culture history. And you can't talk about Into the Spider-Verse without talking about the animation. The animation was spectacular. I read somewhere that it took 4 years for the animators to animate the movie. Like, that's insane. Overall, Into the Spider-Verse was one of the most clever and brilliant movies to come out this decade, and it was definitely an achievement in animation. Inception. Inception wasn't just a movie. It was an experience. Christopher Nolan is one of the best filmmakers working today, and the amount of originality and creativity he puts into his movies is just a blessing. It's also a technical achievement. The visuals in Inception were insane. He took the concept of people going into other people's dreams and he made it work. This movie was a powerhouse. I do prefer The Dark Knight just slightly more, but overall, Inception is a fantastic movie, and it was one of the most beautiful and astounding films to come out this decade.
The Social Network.
Keep in mind, The Social Network is about Mark Zuckerberg and how he created Facebook, and on paper, that just sounds like one of the most boring movies ever made, but what we got was one of the most intense and intriguing movies I've ever seen. The Social Network is right up there with Seven and Fight Club as one of David Fincher's best films. Social Network portrayed Mark Zuckerberg like he was some kind of monster, and did he act like this in real life? I'm not sure, because I never met the guy, so I can't say, but you see him act like such a stuck-up jerk in the movie because he stole the idea of Facebook, and he betrayed so many of his friends, and he just did not care. Overall, The Social Network was one of the most well-made and most intriguing films to come out this decade, and it will have you thinking twice about Facebook.
The World's End.
In my opinion, The World's End was the most underrated comedy to come out this decade. The World's End was a brilliant, clever, and genius comedy. It is hilarious. It blended so many elements of comedy and sci-fi together, and they meshed so well. The World's End was also the third and final installment in the unofficial Cornetto trilogy, the previous ones being Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz. And as much as I love The World's End, I think it's an excellent movie. I do prefer Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz just slightly more. I do think they're a tad bit funnier, but regardless, The World's End is still a hilarious and brilliant movie, and if you guys have not seen it, I definitely recommend it.
Logan.
Of all the superhero movies that came out this decade, Logan was, in my opinion, the best. What made Logan work so well was it didn't feel like another run-of-the-mill superhero movie. It felt like an actual mature movie. The chemistry between Logan and Laura was easily the heart and soul of the movie. Logan was also Hugh Jackman's last time portraying Wolverine, and this was probably the best performance I've ever seen him in. The fact that he wasn't nominated for Best Actor absolutely makes me mad, because he knocked it out of the park one last time.
Scott Pilgrim vs. the World.
Technically, it's not a video game, but Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is the best video game movie ever made. It was such a creative and funny movie. Just like with Into the SpiderVerse, you felt like you were watching a comic book come to life. Fight choreography was insane in it, and Edgar Wright did a brilliant and masterful job directing it, and Michael Cera was the perfect choice to play Scott. He is easily one of the most underrated actors of all time. If you guys have not seen Superbad, I highly recommend checking it out because he is hilarious in it. It really breaks my heart that Scott Pilgrim vs. the World did not do well at the box office. Like, it flopped. No one saw it. And I think I may have to think about this, but I think Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is the most underrated movie of the decade.
Mad Max Fury Road.
If anyone asked me what I think the best action movie of this decade was, I would have to say Mad Max Fury Road. The best way to sum up how insane Fury Road is, imagine drinking a million energy drinks and taking steroids at the same time. That's basically how insane Fury Road is. When it comes to the other Mad Max films, I won't say I'm a diehard fan. I've seen the original and it's okay. It's not as good as Fury Road, but I will say this. And Chris Stuckman said this too in his review. I think Mad Max Fury Road is the best 80s action movie that wasn't released in the 80s.
Baby Driver.
Baby Driver is also the third Edgar Wright film to be on my list, with the others being Scott Pilgrim and The World's End. And Baby Driver, man, this movie is just great. I remember reviewing it when it first came out, and I remember going gaga over it, and I fell in love with it for a good reason. It was a really, really fun movie. In a world where Hollywood just constantly makes sequels, reboots, and remakes, we have original movies like Baby Driver that stand out in the crowd. The cast was great too. Ansel Elgort was phenomenal as Baby. Lily James was great. Jamie Foxx, John Hamm. The entire cast did a good job. And then there's Kevin Spacey.
La La Land.
Just like what I said with Baby Driver, original movies like La La Land do stand in the crowd. La La Land was delightful. It gave me the biggest smile on my face. It was also the perfect love letter to old school Hollywood musicals. Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone were the perfect choices to play the lead characters, and they blew me away by how much talent they put into this movie. La La Land is proof that original movies and musicals are not dead.
Toy Story 3.
Yeah, you guys knew it was gonna be on here. Toy Story 3 is the best animated movie of the decade. What makes the Toy Story movies great is they have messages that both kids and adults can relate to. Come on, let's see it. Raise your hand if the ending of Toy Story 3 made you cry. Come on, let's see it. Come on, you can't hide it. Just admit it. Toy Story 3 is emotional, it's funny, it's profound and thought-provoking, and it was a beautiful ending to the trilogy. And then we got Toy Story 4, and it was great too.
The Irishman.
I doubt he's watching this, but Martin Scorsese, please make movies forever. Scorsese crafted not only another epic crime drama, but a emotional, intriguing, and profound and thought-provoking film. We all had dreams of seeing Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, and Joe Pesci all together in the same movie, and we got it. And they knocked it out of the park with their performances. The Irishman is a 3.5 hour long epic that never drags, it never gets boring, and it's intriguing from start to finish.
The Lighthouse.
Spoiler alert if you have not seen my top 10 best movies of 2019 video yet, but The Lighthouse was my number one choice. I said this once and I'll say it again. The Lighthouse is the reason why I love film. It is the definition of well made. You watch it and you feel like you're watching a movie from the 1920s. It's the best horror film to come out this decade, and Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe gave career best performances in it. If you guys missed out on seeing The Lighthouse in theaters, I highly recommend checking it out when it comes to VOD. It is absolutely worth your time.
Whiplash.
Whiplash, what else about it has not been said already? This movie will make you nervous from start to finish. Miles Teller gave a fantastic performance in it, and of course, the highlight of the movie is J.K. Simmons as the band teacher. Holy crap. You see him in the movie and you feel bad for Miles Teller's character because he's just getting tortured by this teacher who is so hardcore and he does not take crap from anyone. And Simmons absolutely deserves the Best Supporting Actor Oscar for sure. Overall, Whiplash was one of the most intense and stress-inducing movies to come out this decade. Alright guys, we finally made it. The long, brutal journey is finally behind us. We finally made it to number one. So what is it? What is my number one choice? What is the one movie this decade that had resonated with me the most? What is the one movie that came out this decade that I loved the most? Well, without further ado, my number one choice is
12 Years a Slave.
Yep, 12 Years a Slave, in my opinion, was the best movie to come out this decade. To me, it wasn't just a movie. It was an emotional experience. It did a brilliant job portraying slavery, and of all the movies I've seen in my life, no other movie did a better job portraying that subject matter better than 12 Years a Slave. It was the most emotional, profound, provocative, and thought-provoking film to come out this decade. And that is why 12 Years a Slave is the best movie of the 2010s. That's it. We did it. We finally did it. We finally got through my top 10 best movies of the 2010s. And sorry for the long video, guys. I just had a lot to talk about. So, just one announcement to make, and that is I have one more video to make of the year, and that is my top 10 most anticipated movies of 2020 video, and that's coming real soon, so stay tuned for that. So what are your picks for the best movies of the 2010s? Whatever they are, just leave them in the comments below. And as always, if you want to see more of my videos, just be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more great content.